Canada and Ukraine have ratified the Audiovisual Co-Production Treaty.
From now on, producers from Canada and Ukraine can create wonderful films together, drawing on the support of both countries.
Ukraine has changed its legislation and offers cash rebates for filmmakers now.
It's intensives, 25% plus 5% if it is connected to any Ukrainian story.
Canadian producers may be interested in Ukrainian outdoor locations. There are the High Carpathians and a post-apocalyptic Chernobyl. Ukraine has everything you need, from deserts to medieval castles.
This treaty lays the foundation for strong collaboration on what I am sure will be some very compelling film and television projects.
2 Ukrainian voiceover studios became Netflix official partners this year. It is possible to create anything from feature films, 2 and 3D animation, to augmented reality projects VR.
We have well-prepared staff which have very good creative ideas and very high level of preparation.
Ukrainian producers have experience in co-production. They have made 50 films with Poland, Great Britain, and Germany. Canadian Ambassador Larissa Galadza visited the largest film studio in Eastern Europe.
I saw the trailer for The Rising Hawk, and now I'm out here and I see the set where it was all filmed, and I see how, and I am amazed, I'm impressed with how you went from what's here to what I saw in the movie theater.
So welcome to Ukraine. Hope to see all you here soon.
The treaty between Ukraine and Canada was signed for 5 years with an automatic extension possibility.
Both our countries can't wait to see the first Canada-Ukraine official co-production project. Who will be the first?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel, Treat It Right, starting a Canada-Ukraine Treaty Co-Production Project. My name is Charlotta Cheta, and I will be moderating today's session. I am the Director of Development and Corporate Affairs of the Canadian Media Producers Association. We are Canada's trade association for independent English language producers. Today's panel discussion is also the kickoff of the second Canada-Ukraine co-production meetings and conference. Programming will continue until the end of October, and it will feature online events for producers from Canada and Ukraine. The events will focus on exploring opportunities that this new treaty brings, and participating producers will have the chance to pitch their projects and to schedule business meetings with potential partners. Back in 2020, when we held the first edition of this event on Berlinale, which already seems like ages ago, we facilitated over 70 B2B meetings, and this time we are looking to beat that record. So if you're a producer, don't miss the chance and sign up now. At the end of this panel, we will be providing a link to the event website where you will find the details and application instructions. I would like to thank the partners who helped make this event happen: Canadian Heritage, the Ukrainian State Film Agency, and the Embassy of Canada to Ukraine. We are pleased to be partnering with you to offer this initiative to help strengthen the relationship between Canada and Ukraine. I trust you will find this panel informative and that it will inspire collaboration between our two countries. Now, I would like to introduce our panelists for today's discussion. Susan King is Analyst, Co-Production Administration, Business Affairs, and Co-Production at Telefilm Canada. Marina Kuderchuk is the head of the Ukrainian State Film Agency. Louise O'Brien Morin is Director of Film Financing, Tax Credits, and Film Commission Services at Manitoba Film and Music. We also have two producers joining our panel today who are already exploring co-production opportunities between our two countries. From the Ukrainian side, we have Katerina Vishnevska, who's head of development and co-productions and producer at Film UA. And from the Canadian side, Gavin Reardon, who's head of international sales and co-productions and producer at Incendo. First, I would like to turn it over to Susan to briefly explain the role of Telefilm and to talk a little bit about the opportunities this treaty will unlock for producers from the two countries.
Hello, sure. Telefilm Canada is a federal agency which is mandated by the Canadian government via the Department of Heritage to administrate all of Canada's audiovisual treaties. Telefilm also provides financing opportunities for feature films via the Canadian Feature Film Fund and various networking opportunities for producers through the International Promotion Department. The advantage of the treaty is that a project co-produced under an audiovisual treaty gives it the status of national project in both countries, even for the minority partner who could go as low as 15% of the contribution. They would still be recognized as a national project and thus eligible to apply for any financial aid designated for national projects. That's the big gain.
Thank you, Susan. I'd like to turn it over to you, Marina, and if you could tell us a little bit about the role of the Ukrainian Safe Film Agency and how it's supporting producers who are interested in exploring opportunities under the treaty.
Hello, everybody. The Ukrainian Film Agency in Ukraine is the main authority which is supporting cinematography, our producers. From our side, we are conducting the contests and pitchings where we provide financial support for the films of different categories, documentaries, animations, feature films, both auteur and commercial ones. And also, since this year, we're also supporting TV shows. And we are providing grants of the President of Ukraine. We're so happy that last year, we've ratified the treaty about the common co-production of audiovisual films with Canada, and we hope for further cooperation. As for the co-production, I'd like to mention that at our contests and pitchings, we are also considering the projects in cooperation with other countries of the world. And we already, since last year, have some experience of work with Eurimage, and we do hope that there will be some cooperation with Canada as well. As for today, we provide support in the co-production for the full-length films for about $1 million, up to $1 million, and as for the TV shows, about $50,000 per episode. It shouldn't be the whole sum of money, but just the sum of support from behalf of Ukraine as the state. And then the TV channels and other countries are involved into the budgeting. The budgeting can be unlimited, but so far our budgets are like these. Further on, everything depends on the funding of the branch and the industry in the state as it is, which budget is approved and adopted for the following years. But still, every year we have some new films issued with in the co-production with other countries, and we hope more and more for this kind of cooperation, because then the Ukrainian films can travel more all over the world, and we have more films and movies where Ukraine takes part in the production, but still our audience likes those movies if they are of foreign production. This cooperation is very important for us, and we do hope that rather soon we'll have the new films in co-production with Canada.
Great, thank you so much, Marina. As most of you know, in Canada, provincial funding agencies and film commissions play a very important role in our ecosystem. Louise, I'd like to turn it over to you, and could you please talk a little bit about the role of these agencies when it comes to co-production?
Sure, absolutely. And first, I just want to say how thrilled we are to be part of this. Manitoba in particular, but Canada at large. I mean, the relationship between us is historically and currently important. And I want to congratulate all of you on the hard work that it took to get us to this point. And also the success of those B2B meetings in Berlin in 2020 was extraordinary. It was supposed to end at a certain time, and it just kept going on and on and on. So I think there's a lot to talk about. Manitoba or Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories. And all of us have slightly different offerings in terms of funding, whether it's for the development of projects, the production of projects, tax credits, and how they're eligible and applicable. The beauty of us now having this co-production arrangement, as Susan said, is if it's a treaty co-production, then it's treated, in Canada as Canadian content, which means that you could maximize the tax credit by being able to access the Canadian content tax credit. Each of the provinces have their own respective tax credits. Some are, more lucrative, less lucrative, but it's all in the efforts to try to balance the playing field, to be quite honest. So tax credits can actually make up a significant portion when structured, well structured and organically from the development stage, so that you're not trying to back a production into a tax credit. The tax credits are what's, sort of in North America considered soft money because it's not repayable and they're bankable here. And so that can contribute, on the low side, anywhere from, sort of 15% to the high side, say 30%. I mean, it's a very broad range, right? And it's all depending on the choices that you make. But that can become a piece of your financing structure. In addition, different provinces have different funding programs or schemes, as they call them more widely in Europe. And that's again where it would be both the Ukrainian producer and the Canadian producer from whatever their respective province is applying for funding, whether it's production funding. And generally that production funding comes in the form of equity. So there's basically three types of funding that you could garner from Canada. And that would be applying for funding from Telefilm, and that would be the Canadian producer applying for our national funding from Telefilm, if it was a true co-production treaty. Then they could also apply for more modest funding from provinces that have equity funding. And then they could also apply for tax credits. So that's three different sources of financing that they could bring to it. And there's a great, appreciation for the stories that have sort of common lineage or common threads between, the two countries. And we really look forward to the opportunity to meet more Ukrainian producers and see what opportunities lay ahead for Canadian producers and Ukrainian producers.
Great, thanks so much.
Just one last little tidbit. Huge Ukrainian populations in Canada, particularly Western Canada, and in Manitoba, the Ukrainian population is probably over 15% of our total provincial population. And that would certainly be similar, I believe, through Saskatchewan and Alberta. A little bit less in BC, but just because of the agricultural commonalities, that's why a lot of them are in Western Canada.
Great, thank you, Louise. So now, how do we put all of this in practice? I'd like us to hear from the producers who are already exploring opportunities under the treaty. Please tell us a little bit about your companies and how this collaboration that you're working on right now came about. First, over to you, Katerina.
Thank you. So I'm Katerina Vishnevska, and I handle development and co-productions for Ukraine's largest studio, Film UA. We operate across feature films, premium scripted drama, non-scripted animation, etc. We have been incredibly lucky over the years to have been supported by Ukrainian State Film Agency on a number of our projects. But both us and USFA are basically limited by the size of the country. Ukraine may look big on the map, but the reality is it is not a large economy. and that creates certain conditions. There's historically, there were certain stories, certain genres that were off limits to us just because of the size of the media market that we operate in. And of course, as a producer, we want to tell bigger stories better with bigger budgets, etc. And therefore, co-production has always been at the top of our mind. It's a natural way forward to increase the financing available for your projects, but also to find new territories for distribution for your content. And it's not just about commerce. For none of us in this business, I think all of us, we have to feel passionate about the stories we tell. And co-production is, in my opinion, the most powerful tool we can possibly have. You know, it's the soft power that we can actually, in a way, export Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian values, Ukrainian heritage, Ukrainian stories in a very unobtrusive way, without people even realizing what just happened. So when so co-production is something that we have been always working towards. Like this year, for instance, we did a co-production with Italy for Rai Cinema. When we approach co-production and why Canada comes so massively into play is you need to have certain commonality. That can be a shared border, for instance, like with some of the Central European, Eastern European countries. Like Louise has already said, Canada has a massive diaspora. There's nowhere so many Ukrainians as in Canada. So for us, it was always an obvious choice to try and make it work between Ukraine and Canada. But this only became possible now that the treaty is in place. I think I've said enough.
Great, thanks. Gavin, over to you.
Thanks. Incendo has always been interested in co-production. We have co-produced a number of TV series, including Caruso in the late noughts, which was a South African, UK, Canadian co-production. And then more recently, we were the co-production partner on the TV series Versailles with Kappa out of France. And both were extremely successful, especially internationally. And I think one of the best things about Canada is their stance on co-productions and the treaties that they have set up. I think they're 58 at the moment, which really, I think, strengthens their position. I think it's not dissimilar in a way to what Katerina was saying about Ukraine. Canada is obviously not a massive country, a fairly small population relative to, for instance, the United States. And one of the things that I think has allowed Canada to become such a prominent production partner in the world are these treaties. The fact that they have such a robust and strong production system in Canada is a result, I think, of the treaties and also their stance on keeping their productions independent and keeping their culture vibrant through media, through television specifically. We're very excited to be working with Film UA. I've known Katerina for quite a while, and I've known the work of Film UA for a long time, starting with The Sniffer, which was a TV series, very successful TV series a number of years ago. More recently, they had a TV series, Hide and Seek, which is truly phenomenal, and the quality of production is remarkable. And I think we've always been interested in trying to figure out how to work together. And this particular project, I think, came up as one that not only one that would, I think, work for both countries in terms of the commercial aspect, but also one that's, I think, different and fun and unique, one that you don't necessarily see in the market. So I think I covered it, yes?
That's great, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about the details of the project? Where are you at? What are the next steps? What are the elements that you felt that really made it a great material for Canada-Ukraine potential co-production? And I'll just leave it over to both of you to discuss.
Well, Katya, you want to start?
I'll just briefly introduce this story and then we'll pass the ball over to you. Obviously at some point we needed to find the perfect story, and it took a while to find this story. I think what attracted us to Monster Inside is how it uses genre, in our case horror comedy, to tell a story that tackles really timely and relevant issues. In a nutshell, it's a story of Felix Rudenko, a small-time mobster out of Canada, of Ukrainian heritage, obviously, who at some point, trying to evade the Canadian intelligence services, escapes into, let's call it the old country, the country of his parents, where he goes into a hideout. But at a certain point, when he is out and about in the woods of the northern Ukraine, he gets attacked and bitten by a werewolf. And therefore his transformation begins. So we basically use what happens to Felix. He's a small-time mobster, a crook really, who is always trying to evade and avoid all and any responsibility, but now he's given this superpower that he needs to learn how to deal with, and hence the name of the series Monster Inside, because even though it's a genre story, it actually tackles the issue of every single human, whether Ukrainian or Canadian, having that monster inside that we need to acknowledge, bring to the surface, and hopefully make the monster work for us, not the other way around. So that's, I think, the very short pitch. And from the commercial perspective, like why we wanted this to be a co-production is because genre story is not something that is prominent in Ukraine, going back to what I was talking about, the size of the market. So basically, you know, if we're talking of commercial cinema, for instance, it's mostly major American studio releases or comedies that are box office hits. If we're talking about scripted drama, then it's channels who dictate what they would put money into. And it's normally something very play it safe, very mainstream, very general audience. So it's this kind of project, it has got to be a co-production.
I think when we started looking at this material, it's written by Anthony Aline and Matteo Berdini. We felt that the confluence, the idea of mixing comedy horror, but I would also characterize it as fantasy, and the gritty reality of organized crime, a crime story. I feel we felt that was again something that hadn't been seen before, and would have a level of commercial interest, specifically, obviously, in the larger markets that we all have to deal with, all have to play in. With Monster Inside, we have been actively developing the project, working with the writers, internally developing the stories, coming up obviously with the budgets and the plans to move this project ahead, hopefully to the point where we're going to be filming, we hope sometime next year, hopefully middle of summer, end of summer of next year. And one that we're very excited to begin to take to market. We have a partner that we're working with to take the project out and start to pitch it very soon, hopefully as soon as Series Mania, which is coming up later on this month.
And where will you be filming?
Well, that's a very good question. Since the primary location is the Ukraine, it would more than likely be filmed, if not entirely, mostly in the Ukraine. But we're still working on the scripts and determining where we're going to, how it's going to play out. That hasn't been confirmed yet, but for the most part, Ukraine.
Great, thanks.
Can I ask a question? Gavin and Katerina, would you say that, you know, with the change in technology and the streamers, the global appetites are more open and more curious about content from around the world, whereas sort of in pre-streaming days, when it was strictly terrestrial networks, there were more creative confines in terms of what broadcasters perceived audiences would watch?
Absolutely, the streamers have changed the rules of the game for everyone. I don't think storytelling like the one that we're attempting would have been possible even 2-3 years ago. I think in that way, inadvertently, lockdown has really helped because people went down to the depth of Netflix and found, the Sniffer, Hide and Seek, etc. Ukrainians found Canadian series because there's some amazing series out there that you just kind of never had the time to watch. So absolutely, the streamers did help us in terms of which stories are now possible and which stories are now possible to co-produce as well.
I think also at the root of the question is language. I think I used to work for a German company and sell German content around the world. And this was in the late noughts. And I will tell you, there was no one in the United States who was acquiring German language subtitled, dubbed content. It didn't matter. And I think the streamers, look, one of the first series that Netflix acquired was Lilyhammer. And that had a mix of English and Norwegian. And before that, you would never have seen a show like that on television in the United States, but it was a massive success. And I think the idea that you can have a show that mixes English and Ukrainian or whatever other language, look at Lupin, being a success around the world, including the United States. So yes, I do think, and I completely agree with Katya with the fact that it also, lockdown, I think, did change people's willingness to experiment and view different kinds of content.
And I'd like to bring back Susan and Marina just about the process of setting up a treaty co-production between the two countries. And specifically, I think a lot of producers might have that question in their mind about language requirements, as Gavin just touched on. Is there anything in the treaty that requires about languages?
Well, for instance, at Towers, if the film is produced in Ukrainian, then of course, if Ukrainian language is more than 90% in the film, then the film has the certificate of the national production. And as for taxation, there will be a tax credit for the VAT. As for the language restrictions, we don't have any other restrictions or bonuses for that. But still, the film can be shot in Ukrainian and in English, or it can be shot in English and dubbed into Ukrainian.
Great, thanks. How about on the Canadian side?
It's similar in Canada. You need to have an original version in either English or French, being the two official languages of Canada, for exploitation in Canada. And generally, we like to see if there is a dubbed version, that dubbed version be made in a co-producing country, because in Canada we have the two official languages. But in a co-production scenario, because all of the treaties allow location shooting, documentaries can be made. So it's entirely possible that the project could be originally filmed in a language other than English or French, or in this case, Ukrainian. And you need to ensure that there's a original production budget that's made in one of the official languages in Canada. Funding requirements may be slightly different. So for that, I would recommend that each producer verify with the program that they're applying to.
And if I can just add one thing, Manitoba is unique. This is the only time I'll sort of put a spotlight on Manitoba, in that you're not bound to produce, whether it's fiction, animation, drama, in a specific language. So it could be produced entirely in the Ukrainian in Ukraine. I was reminded last time we don't say the Ukraine, right? So in Ukraine language, and you could still get the up to 65% tax credit. Sure, I was just saying, you know, one caveat is, I know we're talking about co-production treaty, but if you were to structure it under a co-venture, so it wasn't official treaty, you could still take advantage of lucrative tax credits if you wanted to produce it strictly in Ukraine language first, and then dub it into English or whatever.
Okay, that's useful to know. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So looking at the opportunities that this treaty presents, I'd like to sort of hear from the producers first about where you see potentials going forward. You know, if there are any particular genres or types of stories that would really be great material for collaboration going forward as sort of advice to other producers who are interested in potentially embarking on this journey?
Well, from my side, I would. We are open to all different kinds of stories. Incendo, as I mentioned, was the co-production partner on Versailles, which was an opulent period piece set obviously in France. But as long as I think the stories have some organic, the storyline has some organic reason why it's put together. As I think this does have, obviously the character's background, Felix's background is Ukrainian, and that's where he goes to try to escape. As long as there's some reason, I think if you try to put two countries together that have no connection culturally, it can feel a little forced. But we're open to any kind of story, and seeing the quality of production that Film UA is capable of. I was at the Kiev Media Week in 2019 and got to visit the studio. When I was in Berlin, they had a series in competition. I believe this is Mr. Jones, which was phenomenal. Really amazing film. I think there's nothing that they can't do. And I think as far as Incendo is concerned as well, Incendo is owned by TVA, which is the French-Canadian broadcaster. We, as part of our group, we have a studio called Mel's, which is an amazing facility in Montreal, and we also have the ability to pretty much do anything. So I think as long as there's an organic reason for the story to connect the two countries, I think you could do anything.
I would second Gavin on that, absolutely. I think like in more sort of like practical examples of what kind of stories that could be, I think at least from the perspective of a Ukrainian producer, immediately, finally, I can start looking at, let's say, period pieces and not necessarily for 18th, 17th, etc. century, but actually modern history, something that is organically set between Canada and Ukraine. Any kind of story where you have, for instance, I don't know, Canadian intelligence services cooperating with Ukrainian police. Anything that involves, I don't know, tracking crimes or whatever, or a sports drama that is taking place across Canada, for Ukraine, etc. Now all of this has become a possibility all of a sudden. Like there's quite a few, I don't know, like there's a shared passion for hockey, for instance, in Ukraine and Canada. So there's that. We can definitely tell a bunch of stories about that, I'm pretty sure. It doesn't have to be based on any real characters, even though there's Kukia, for instance. We can also do a modern day, I hope no one is stealing my idea right now, but we can do a modern day sports drama. Why not?
Done, let's do this.
You know what, and can I add in, you could sell it to one of the sports networks for their first dramatic series based on sports, not the traditional broadcaster.
Yeah, exactly.
a good idea.
I think
Group hug, everybody.
So for both Canadian producers who now, after hearing about the opportunities, looking for Ukrainian co-producers and vice versa, first I'll go to Marina. How if a Canadian producer is interested in finding a Ukrainian co-producer, what would you suggest that they start? Where did they start their search?
Well, maybe you should join us during our pitching processes and just to see how the producers and the film directors are presenting their projects, their ideas at such pitching process. There are lots of talented people. Some of them have some experience. Some of them are creating debuts. They are coming to such pitchings, and you can join us through Zoom or watch our YouTube recordings. And in this way, you will have an opportunity to obviously see what projects exist, to attract your own experience and co-funding and an intention to create some co-production.
I mean, if I can just add, when we were in Berlin and there were the B2B meetings, I sat in on behalf of Manitoba producers that weren't able to be there. And there were so many vibrant Ukrainian producers with dynamic ideas. And going back to the hockey one, it's already come out, but a Ukraine producer had come out with this great documentary on NHL players of Ukrainian heritage, and had even gotten an interview as part of it with Wayne Gretzky and his dad Walter, which was sort of the ultimate coup, because they don't go political, but it was from the heart.
Yes, those are the Ukrainians who migrated to Canada. I'm speaking about the Ukrainians who migrated to Canada and became celebrities in Canada.
So I was just using that as a vehicle of great story ideas. Definitely worth the time for B2B meetings from Canadian producers to find alignment either on, values in terms of how they co-produce, what they can both bring to it, how they can complement each other and receive the stories. So.
Susan, would you have? Go ahead.
Yes, for sure. I think that there's a lot to be said for very organic, natural co-productions, as I tend to call them, that have stories that reverberate with both Canadian and Ukrainian audiences. We have the luxury at Telefilm in the Treaty Office of enjoying the neutrality of the text of the treaty, which means that your project can be about anything. We are content neutral, and I say that a little bit proudly because we don't have to judge the project. It may be a natural story to seek out a partnership. I would say that the most important thing when you're creating a partnership to make a co-production is the relationship between the individual co-producers, aside from the subject matter, because your collaboration is going to take place over a number of years probably, and you need to feed the agencies both in Canada and in Ukraine with the required documentation. And after you get the preliminary recommendation, you need to come back to us after the film is finished or the project is finished, and we re-verify that your project is in conformity with the treaty. The other opportunity is that a producer doesn't have to have an established track record, which for some funding programs, at least in Canada, is a requirement. A new producer can be a co-producer. So we like to say that as long as you comply with the terms of the treaty, which are very open and very generous, you can make a co-production, and you can maybe make a first project that is bigger than a national project that might be available to you. So the relationship between the producers, regardless of the subject matter, is extremely important. I've seen time and time again over my years at Telefilm where after the final project is finished in one country, it may not be finished in another country. That's natural, that the release dates may be different. The final versions may come out at different times. Final costs may be done at different times. And so there's a bit of an offset. And sometimes the producers are left chasing each other to try and get the final documentation to get their final recommendation from us. And so our responsibility is to create an active dialogue, which we're working on with our new Ukrainian partners, and we're really happy to have met Marina and the rest of the people who have helped us to get in touch with this new partner country. And so I've never seen as much buzz around a new treaty as around this one. So I just want to say, from a co-production office standpoint, I have very high hopes for this relationship.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, Gavin,
I can also, yes, I was going to say, I went to the Kiev Media Week 2 years ago and met amazing people, had a wonderful time. Kiev is an amazing city, and heard really unique stories from writers and different producers. I think there's a wealth of ideas. And I think if you're a Canadian producer interested in working with Ukraine, it's very straightforward. Go to Kiev Media Week, which is coming up, I think, very soon. The other thing is, if you're Ukrainian, I would imagine come to TIFF, because everyone's there. It's a great representation of the Canadian market, Canadian media. And one other thing I would point out, you're absolutely right. Whoever said, making sure that, I think Susan, that you have a partner that you enjoy working with, because you're going to be working with them for a long time. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm very excited and looking forward to Monster Inside, hopefully being the first Canadian-Ukrainian television series co-production to break in this this new treaty, because Film UA and Katerina are great partners.
Thanks a lot. Louise, for Ukrainian producers, would there be any other events that you would suggest, maybe more on the TV side, that they might be interested in exploring, or organizations that they might contact to find out who are the Canadian producers who would be potentially a good match for them?
I mean, on the TV side, I mean, Banff is traditionally the TV market, but in all honesty, you know, when you have large events like TIFF, you know, you have the world there, and because so many people are working no longer exclusively in either film or TV, and there seems to be a real convergence, I would probably take advantage of that, just because you're gonna have the opportunity to talk to them, and also just in terms of sort of the cycle of funding. You know, if you can do a meeting during TIFF, you can follow it up, or you know, continue that relationship remotely until Berlin, the European market, right? And hopefully be solidifying things and just thinking in terms of getting funding applications in for the beginning of the fiscal year. But I think that is, you know, the best way to do it. There's also an event. It happens to take place in Manitoba, but it's attracting people from all across Canada, and it comes in January. It's called All Access, and we get a lot of the Canadian broadcasters out here now, and in a weird way, because it's in a smaller center and at a smaller event, you have greater access than you do when they're in Toronto or wherever. We've sort of got them trapped in Winnipeg in January, so you know, they're a captive audience.
Great, thanks so much. I would like to thank our panelists for participating in today's discussion, and again, the support of all the partners who helped make this happen. As I mentioned at the beginning, please don't forget to sign up for the rest of the events and at the second Canada-Ukraine co-production meetings and conference. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.